Well, cool. Since we last spoke, I actually started teaching jazz students, which,
Oh, nice, man. Nice.
yeah, I hadn't done it before and I kind of had a bunch of imposter syndrome around it. Like, who am I to teach jazz?
Oh no, it's
And
okay, man. As long as you're trying to spread the knowledge, it's cool. It's cool.
yeah, yeah. And once we got into it, it just became a lot of fun. And then it was less about me and more just about like problem solving with
Yeah,
them. But I've got,
exactly.
yeah, that whole experience primed me with a bunch of questions. I feel like I've had a bunch of things happen since the last time we talked. So,
Come on with it.
how would you take somebody who's played the drums for a long time, but never played swing, never played jazz music, never played swing beats? And like, what would the average step by step for you look like getting them to be comfortable improvising within swing?
Are we assuming that they've studied some rudiments and stuff like that, or is this is
Yes.
a total like okay? Well, if they've studied some rudiments, then it's a little easier to get to understand some of the vocabulary. So I start off probably with something that's easier to understand. Like I'm not going to start them with Elvin or Tony or some shit like that. No, I'm going to go like Papa Joe, a Chick Webb, Sick Khaled, like to understand like this really old school approach of like what the drums were doing and the function of the drums and how the evolution took place like over time and how the bass drum became softer and it went more away from playing doom, 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 doom on the floor tom to to the swing beat, to the actual swing beat. And then, my thing is always I talk to people, walk the dog. If we I would say that like that's the one thing that we all can grasp. It's not difficult to say walk the dog and have them play that, like walk the dog, and say, okay. Now, a lot of times what happens is with younger students or people who've never studied it, this whole thing of coordination starts to come into play because maybe they're used to just playing a hi-hat like this, and they've not had to use it in a different way. So then we implement just playing walk the dog and playing the hi-hat on 2 and 4 and trying to feather the bass drum. That's the very first basic thing that we start to do, because in that right there, that can take a long time for a lot of people, like to get the bass drum so it's not heard at all. It's just something that you feel yourself, but no one else should hear it, and so that's the hardest part. And then once you get there, then it's about talking, I have them watch tap dance videos, because essentially what we're doing with all 4 limbs is what tap dancers do. We're kind of, I don't want to say we're not copying, but we're duplicating or replicating, I should say, just this concept of rhythm and phrasing, which tap dancers do perfectly. And so that's what we do. So we start there. A lot of listening, before we even get to really playing, because if they've heard the sound, if they've heard the music and they get into it, that's a lot easier to teach someone something if they're really into it. If they're not into it and they don't know what it sounds like, then they're frustrated, so.
Yeah, this really resonates. One of the things I've noticed is that it's really difficult to get people simultaneously to be consistent with the swing feel and like getting the eighth note right and the touch and everything
Yep.
correct, but also comfortable with the idea flow. So
Exactly.
it feels like balancing on a balance beam where like you can get people to come up with ideas, but then the swing feel is suffering and it's inconsistent. Or
Exactly.
you can get people to drill like Spangalang for 3 months, but then they're going to get bored because they're not improvising.
Yeah,
Is
they're
that
not
something?
doing anything else. Exactly.
Yeah. How do you introduce improvisational elements gradually for your students, or do you do that? Is
No, we
is
do.
there a
We do.
balance you're
And
trying to strike? Okay.
we do totally. I mean, yeah, you have to. If you make a student do something for 3 to 4 months and they don't do anything else, at some point, yeah, you not only will they get bored, but you will too. So it's like we're working on the ride symbol pattern, but then I'm saying to them, okay, let's take for someone who's never ever done it, right? I'll say, okay, I might say, now I'm going to sing a phrase to you between the snare drum and bass drum. And I just want you to play that back. And this is before we even get into any books, like, because if I go into the books, it's right there. I can get it to them that way. But I wanted them to kind of use their own mind first. So I'll sing some phrases to them, simple phrases, and just have them work on that. And then I'll say, okay, well, what phrase do you hear between the bass drum and snare drum as you're keeping time with the hi-hat? And then eventually I'll say, but everything we just did, you can find all that right here in this book, Jim Chapin. And let me tell you why, because Jim Chapin, all he did was go around, copped all the ideas from all the cats and put it in a book. So you got two ways you can do it. You can be someone who wants to really enjoy and really go deep and learn and check out all the records that all of this stuff comes from. But in addition to that, you have it right in front of you. Some people, they can't, their minds only work if they see it written down. And I'm trying to get the students to get away from that and hear the music. Like when you listen to Philly, or when you listen to Max, what are you hearing? And then be able to identify what strokes they're playing. And so if we can get to that point over time, then I know the student is in the right place,
Yeah. We talked a lot last time about feathering the kick drum because I had seen your Instagram stuff. I was texting with John Riley, so I was in the middle of like a kick feathering renaissance. I was like, I need to double down on this.
No, I know John. John used to teach at Manhattan School of Music. I didn't study with John, I studied with Justin, but John's a friend. A mentor, someone that has been instrumental and not in really teaching, but just in his words. And whenever I see him, he'll say something to me that inspires me. So John's a bad, and his book is killing, definitely. So there's so many great guys that I had the pleasure of growing up around. I sat next to Mel Lewis. I sat next to Blakey. I sat next to Elvin. I got to know these guys as friends, not as drummers, but as like, that's the thing that's missing now. I was just talking about this the other day with someone, with Eric McPherson, was just EMAC. My dude was just in Italy 2 days ago. And we talked about this. Like, the thing that's missing is this mentorship that the older cats had, and the fact that they were cool telling you, like, you suck. You need to really get your shit together. And you didn't, it was a test. If you got offended, then but if you took it on and then the next time they heard you, they like, yeah, young man, I hear you, you're getting it together. Okay, keep going. So it's this thing that we have to bring back to the music in a nice way. I think we're so nice now that we feel bad if we tell someone they're not doing something right. But that's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be we mentor and we pass the information on so that it's done correctly, so that everyone can feel good about what they're trying to do. So yeah, John has been instrumental, but there are so many ways that you can get to this music. And it's the younger guys play a different way, but we still try and teach them how it came about. Like, you didn't just start here. No, there's a place where this music evolved from. If you learn that, you can go anywhere and your music will have a foundation. Like, you can hear the cats who have no foundation. They might have great ideas, but that shit is not based. Like, they started from the first floor. They didn't go to the basement and build the basement. So it sounds good, but then if I like to say, we slow it down to that Quincy tempo, which was Quincy used to have a show where he pulled the needle out, and then it was called what was the name? I think it was called Quincy. And Jack Klugman was the doctor, and he pulled the needle out, and all these people dropped. So if we pull a tempo out that's super slow, you'll watch all of these cats drop off because they don't have that in their playing. Now, we can play odd time; they do that shit all day. But so
this is an ongoing debate, and it's something that's come up in a few conversations I've had with different drummers. Is there a difference between jazz and not jazz? And I kind of come down on the side that there is. And one kind of working definition I had was like, could somebody sit in at Smalls, and if somebody counted off like a standard, do they know that tune, and can they hang on it, and can they take solos? And then whatever else they want to do, that's cool. But in my opinion, if someone can't do that, then you can't necessarily call them a jazz musician. What about people who don't necessarily play straight ahead very much? Maybe they're playing fusion, but if they've checked out like the roots stuff, and if they can hang in that sort of sense, what do you say? Yeah,
I have no problem with that. Every genre of music has integrity that needs to be observed. So if I'm gonna play backbeat, I gotta know who James Gadson was. I gotta know Gad. I gotta know all the bad cats who've played the backbeat. Shit, John Bonham. You have to know Buddy Miles. You gotta know all this. I think as drummers, it's like, why wouldn't we want to know all these bad motherfuckers who've done so many different things? Because it's like, it doesn't matter what the genre is. It's just like, this is a bad cat. Keith Moon was a bad cat. Neil Peart was a bad cat. Thomas Hawk is a bad cat. So like, I don't like to say, okay, I like to just, I want to take away the name. I want to take away putting us as jazz musicians, or just call us musicians. And then the hip ones are the ones who check out all the shit. That's all. Like, and so you can come in and play. You might not be the strongest cat, but if you've checked it out, you have an inkling of what's going on. There was a video the other day on Instagram on Neil Peart practicing.
Oh, I saw that.
At his drums, right? And then what he was practicing? He was playing a swing beat. Now, mind you, he wasn't swinging at all, but he was attempting to play a swing beat and comp. That was his practicing. And then he went into this other shit. And I was like, for 5 minutes, that's all I saw. I was like, wow, Neil Peart but you got to remember, all these drummers, these older cats grew up watching the older cats. So someone like, Rolling Stones, Charlie
Watts?
Charlie Watts, right? Charlie was a jazz drummer. I used to see him, and he used to come to shows and see me and say, hey man, I'm a jazz drummer. And I said, yeah, because every time I see you playing with the Stones, you never move. Like, and you got this Gretsch set. He's like, yeah, man, I just fell into that. But when I used to see him in London, he'd be playing jazz shows with his group. So music is music. I think we just need to study and be as well versed in all the genres of music that exist, because there's no way we can, first of all, but that's the fun part. Like, can we play a clave? Can we play 2-3-3-2 with the cats? Can we go to Brazil and play an authentic samba? So I pride myself in all of that stuff. Of course, cats who stay in one genre, they're going to be super bad because that's all they do. But you take them out of that, and the shit is tricky.
I thought of an analogy for playing jazz authentically, which is like speaking a language with a local accent. So it's like, if I go to Italy and I try to speak Italian, I'm going to have an American accent. Of course. The same way, if Neil Peart is playing a swing beat,
exactly,
he's not going to sound like, yeah.
But at least you're trying, and you're still going to be able to communicate. The accent doesn't matter. You're still going to be able to say the words you want to and communicate. So that's really what we're talking about. It's like, can you sit down and communicate? The drums are all about communication. It's a language that we speak to, not only to the people listening, but to the other people playing with us. So can we communicate? That's kind of the way I go. Like I like to just take people for what they can do and show them, man, how it's all connected. So yeah, you don't have to be Buddy Rich or Dave Weckl, two different spectrums of what we call jazz drumming, right? And some people call it Dave fusion drumming. Okay, but Dave knows that stuff too.
I want to dig in a little bit to the back and forth you and I had like last summer.
Yeah.
And we don't have to get into this specific thing, but if I understood if I understood your opinion correctly, I think you were weighing in that you felt like there was a trend of younger drummers only checking out the latest thing, as opposed to going back farther and checking out more roots sort of influences, and that was causing people to recursively all sound the same.
Yeah. And it really, but the weird thing, it wasn't necessarily in like, and this is the weird thing, it's like that happens more in popular music. As opposed, so jazz, the beautiful thing about jazz drumming is, I think that you have to become an individual, like right away. Like you have influences, of course, Elvin, Tony, all the cats, right? But it's because those cats were all older and they established something. So my whole thing was like the younger cats now are going off of something that was established. And I knew, I know one of the guys who kind of came up with Gerald Haywood. We went to high school together, so I saw that forming back then. But Gerald still has Gerald's sound, So my whole thing was like, why not come up with your own sound? Like, why not say, what if I took Elvin and put him in pop music? How would that shit that he played sound? So if I want to play those same kind of fills, but think like Elvin, how would it sound? Or if I want to play those fills and think like Haynes, how would it sound? It'd be different. You can still do that, and then my other thing was like, why do you feel the need that needs to be done? Like, why play all over the shit and don't let the music breathe when you don't need to do that? Like, pick and choose your spots, be stealth. I don't need to show you everything I can do. That's kind of, that doesn't leave anything, no surprise. So I like the element of surprise. I like the element of like, okay, I always keep something in that no one has heard. And when I want to pull it out, then I can pull it out. And you'll be like, oh, shit. And it might be years that you never hear me play it. And then one day you say, damn, okay, wow. And so that's what I was really talking about, was like people becoming individuals. Like Betty Carter told me when I first joined her band, the first rehearsal, she stopped me. She said, okay, I hear Max, I hear Philly. She said, I don't want to hear none of that shit. That's old. I said, oh my God. She's like, you got one song to figure out who you are, or I'll get somebody else to be in my band. So I immediately figured that shit out in one song. Like, okay, I got to come up with a different way to play this shit, because she's heard it all. She's played with those cats, so she didn't want to hear that. So the young cats need to find a way to not sound like each other. Like immediate, like we could do I could play you a bunch of cats right now, and I bet if I played the right parts, you would not know who it is. I bet.
There's definitely some overlap.
Yeah, and it's not but here the other side is, every generation we've done that too. That's the other side of it. It's like, I don't want to come across, like, I understand like what it takes to evolve. You have to. So we have 5 steps, right? Listen, learn, copy, steal, forget. Now this one, if you don't do this, you end up staying and sounding like everybody else. But if you forget and you come into the shit your own way, oh, there you go. That's the shit. So that's all I'm saying. It's like, man, all the students I teach everyone the same method books, the same things, and they all come out so different. Why? Because early on I tell them, listen, we do this so I can prove a point. You're going to hear it, the same song or the same rhythms, differently than I hear it. It could be a very basic rhythm, but you're still going to interpret it your way. I don't want you to interpret it my way. I'm not trying to teach you that. I don't want that. There's only one me. There's one you. So that's my whole thing. It's like, we need to get back to that, like being creative in that way, and not just seeing what someone else does and emulate it to the point where it's just like we kill it, like, like that's not fun anymore. And so that's all I was really speaking to, was that aspect of it. Like, let's be individuals again.
I'm glad you brought out that 5-stage process though, because that really resonates with me, particularly when I go through growth cycles when maybe I'm bored of my playing. So I feel like I have to open the hood and dig in more and like check out more influences. And then for a while, the stuff's in process. Exactly. I wanted to bring it back to that moment with Betty. Well, let you say what you wanted to say first.
No, go ahead. You said it perfectly. I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. You take all that stuff, you marinate on it, and sometimes we don't get to it right away. Sometimes we might not get to it for a few years because we're marinating. Like, what is this shit supposed to sound like? We don't know yet. Until one day we wake up and we say, oh shit, that's it. I heard it. And then you start to get to it. I still listen. I'm the same exact way. We never stop learning. And the day that we think we've got it all together is the day that we should stop playing the instrument, because there's no fucking way. Blakey told me I'm still trying to learn. So if Blakey says it, I just no hope for my ass. Now go ahead, go back to Betty.
Yeah, when you were in that moment with Betty and she said, you've got one more chance to sound like you, did that make you more self-conscious or less self-conscious? In other words, were you self-consciously trying to not sound like Max and Billy Joe in that next take?
Well, the thing was, I was already kind of working on I knew, man, when you hear Philly play some shit on Max, I'm like, there's just no fucking way, man. Like, and my mind was, the Brooklyn in me came out like, man, I'm not going to sit here and have cats be like, oh, he's just copying. So I was trying to figure out ways to morph what they were doing, changing the stickings around, but it takes time to do it. So it goes back to what you said. And so at that point, I hadn't had it enough time to resonate. But when she said that, it immediately clicked in. Okay, well, you know what? I have to disguise all this shit right now just to get through this. Otherwise, I'm fired. So I did that. And then I was able to go back and say, okay, you know what? If I'm listening to Philly, and let me just change the stickings around. Let me see what happens if I come up with my own stickings. And so when I studied with KW, he was like, man, how'd you do that? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, the shit sounds right, but you got your own sticking on. I'm like, yeah, and I'm going to take it even further. So it's just a matter of having a good teacher or having someone at a moment that tells you, listen, man, it sounds great, but when you die, here's the thing I tell my students now. When I die, they're going to say Greg Hutchinson. That's all they can say. They're not going to say anything else, as opposed to, oh, this Greg Hutchinson, who was a copy of so-and-so, 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 so-and-so. No, people copy my shit. I don't copy their shit. And it took a long time to get to that. And I'm still grinding on new language, man. I got so much new shit that it's ridiculous, but I hear what everyone else is doing. And I'm like, oh, I'm still good. I still can wait because they're still trying to catch up to the crazy shit that we were doing back then. So it's motivating to me also though, because like I'm tired of playing shit I've played. So I'm always like, okay, that's enough of that. Once it goes out of the vocabulary, it stays gone, maybe for 10 more years. And then I might bring it back,
Yeah, that can be excruciating. I'm starting to feel that sometimes. And of course I haven't done gigs on anywhere near the level you have, but like when I'll have like a big public performance that's recorded and put on the internet or something, a lot of times after that, it'll feel like a comedy special and like I can't do this material anymore. And then I'm immediately bored of everything I play.
I don't listen, man. I don't listen to records I've played on. People talk to me about it. I'm like, I don't want to hear it because it's a moment that happened. And probably in the same way, we're very picky that way about what we do, right? So, and it doesn't matter like you said something, and I always tell students this and people in general, I came along at the time I came along. You were somewhere else, right? Or you weren't born yet or whatever, but that's okay. It doesn't take away from what you're doing and what I'm trying to do. And what we're both trying to do is trying to really learn to play the instrument the best way we can. So the difference is there are opportunities that were around then are not around now. But the people who were some of the younger cats who are now the older cats were around. And this is the same cycle we've been in since the beginning of time, beginning of playing drums. We got to pass it down. So that's all I'm trying to do is pass it down and give the information. Then everyone can do how they hear with it. I'm not a jazz police at all. Like, man, if you see the shit in my bag, I got my SP404 right here. I got that new teenage engineering joint. So I'm always moving ahead. I'm not staying like there. And I find myself sometimes concentrating on more of that shit now than actually playing. And my girlfriend's like, man, go play the fucking drums. And I'm like, oh shit, you're absolutely right. So we're all trying to learn and trying to go forward, but the only way we can go forward is I can't keep listening to shit that I played because it depresses me. Really, it does. I'm like, oh no.
I'm curious how the moment of like the mid 90s to 2000 aughts seems to you now in retrospect, because looking back on it, I think it was a really special moment in jazz, and I'm not sure we fully appreciated it at the time, but totally. That style of jazz had sort of died and morphed into fusion, and then all of a sudden it was reborn, and there were all these cats like you and Clarence Penn and Blade and Meldau and Christian McBride. Like, looking back on it, What do you think caused that moment, and how does it seem to you?
I think Winton and Bradford were huge in that. The 70s were a period, right, where shit got tricky, sounds got tricky, cats. A lot of cats that were playing, they started going into rock and soul. They were trying to they were like, okay, we need to make some money now. So the resurgence came about because I think those two main guys led it, but there were so many bad cats, and I think it became hip to want to do that. That was the hip thing. Okay, let me get my sound together and become part of this band that's going to make these records, that's going to really change a decade of music, and playing. And like those cats you named, Blade was in school. I was already on the road. And then Blade came out. Tane was already here. Lewis Nash was already here. KW was already here. Ronnie Barrage, another cat that nobody really talks about because of some other issues he had. So there was Victor Lewis, Tony Reedus. There were so many guys. And then we had Elvin, Tony, and Blakey, and Haynes that was still coming through, Jack. So the thing that was so hip is that we were just trying to play the music the way we heard it. And in that period, I think we were doing that same thing that I talked about. We were trying to, I don't want to say copy, but we were trying to further that same sound that was heard in the 50s and the 60s. And now things have changed, really changed. So where that sound is not really so much popular anymore, but it's a different sound that cats are going for. But the only way you can get to that other sound is you got to know that shit first. You can't play straight eighth if you can't swing, at least, You can't play odd time if you have no idea what it is.
What do you see as the cutting edge of the music these days, given that you're sort of plugged into the students?
I like, in terms of the drummers, or just, the
Or just
music is
where everything's going?
Yeah, I think it's going more away from swing and more into this very heady intellectual kind of odd time straight eighth nothy kind of thing, which is cool. But if you think about it, tell me, and I don't know where you're at right now, but tell me the last time you've really gone to a club and heard a bunch of cats really just trying to swing without any odd time shit happening or any straight eighth note shit. And so that's kind of where we're headed, which is cool. But here's the thing: cycles always happen. We've been here before we were born, and it's going to happen after we're gone. And it's just a cycle in music. There's only but so much shit you can do, and so it's we'll get to a period and then cats will be like, okay, you know what? No, we don't want to do that anymore. Let's go back to swing. Okay. Then it'll be another period. Okay, no. And then let's go back to fusion. Okay. Oh, okay. No, let's go back to bebop again. Let's go back. So it's always going to keep that. And I think that's the beautiful thing is each generation will bring back the thing that they think is the hip thing to be playing now. So
why do you think there's so much continued interest in people learning these older styles of jazz in a way that maybe hasn't persisted for other genres? And my recent experience with this is just I was astonished how many pop drummers were interested in spending a lot of time learning to swing. I'm like, oh, that's a thing.
It makes the music feel different. It makes your groove feel different also. And I think that's one of the key things. And I also think that, a lot of guys before they go into playing pop music, they've had to do gigs where, oh shit, we gotta swing. And they've never, they didn't know what that was. And so the interest will always be there because it's difficult to do. It's not easy at all. You can take someone and make them play a simple backbeat, or 2 and 4, and they can get that. But if I tell you, okay, now we're gonna be coordinated with all 4 limbs and you gotta comp, you have to make the story yourself. That's super hard to do, man. That's making you engage your brain in a way that you weren't used to. So you have to come up with these combinations between the bass drum and snare drum, and at the same time you're still maintaining this. That's different than that kind of stays in the same spot. This is always moving differently. And so I think that's the challenge. And I think a lot of guys maybe they stray away from it at first, but at some point they say, okay, you know what, let me check it out. I don't have, like I said, I don't have to be the best, but just having some knowledge of it helps.
Yeah, there are certain things that I've realized that we kind of take for granted, and I flatter myself by saying we in this situation, but those of us who studied jazz to
Good,
some
man, you play
degree.
drums. You're a drummer, baby.
I appreciate it. But those of us who've studied jazz to at least some degree maybe don't realize that people who haven't have more trouble thinking in 8 and 16 and 32 and 12 bar phrases, have more
Exactly.
trouble keeping a song form in their heads. If you ask them to do anything other than play a written out drum beat, if you're playing James Brown, if you're playing Clyde Stubblefield, but you ask them to like improvise within that groove, like that's a completely different demand. So I think maybe there's a level of like knowing songs and being able to improvise even within the groove that jazz drummers sort of take for granted.
That's an interesting. I gotta think about that right there. Hmm.
It's like jazz privilege, right?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Yeah, it's a. Let
Or
me,
maybe
let
I'm
me,
crazy.
let me. No, 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 no. Matt, repeat that again. I'm gonna try and come a different way with it. Say it again.
So I think that drummers who have studied jazz and played jazz at least for a little while,
Yeah.
we don't realize that people who haven't might have more difficulty, for instance, keeping a 32 bar song form in their head and
Exactly.
or improvising within a groove context. So even if you're playing like okay, now change that just a little bit. Like vary it, orchestrate something to a tom, or like play a fill that's kind of within the groove. And I think for jazz drummers, maybe because we're used to the swing beat is like always improvising. It's yeah.
You kind of answered it. It has to do with the fact that there's no consistency in the jazz music is this thing right here, right? The ride cymbals, but everything else, and the hi-hat, pretty much right, 2 and 4. But everything else that happens is spontaneous. And so we're already doing that. So if you ask us to play a groove and add a tom fill someplace, okay, that's easy. That comes naturally easy because it's not difficult, because we're doing all this other stuff that's so much more difficult than that. And we grow up hearing those things. Now, in terms of song form, that we could go back to musicianship, like how cats learn the music, because I think that has to do less with the drums and more with how you're taught. Like if you're in school and you study theory, well, you're going to understand A, B, A. You're going to understand song form because they're going to drill that into your head. If you've never done that, then that's where you get those issues. But so I don't know if that's necessarily a drum thing more than that's like a learning process of how people learn the music. And so, yeah, I was learning about song form before I knew a lot of shit on the drums. I was like, oh, I wish I could play that in that form, but no, okay. Oh, here we go. And so I think it's important both. You got to really be versed in both. You got to study, understand how forms work. At the same time, you got to understand how to manipulate songs when you have these strange forms and going from section to section what needs to happen. Even in jazz drumming, same thing in R&B drumming. There's a verse, there's a chorus. You got to know how to get into that. What are you going to play? What kind of fill you're going to play getting into that? And what is the groove? So all these things, these structures are still there. We implement them differently.
You mentioned earlier, and you actually echoed something that John said when I talked to him, which is that the mentorship's going away. So for musicians coming up now, they can't just go intern in Blakey's band, and they might not necessarily have an elder telling them, hey, this doesn't sound great, try this. And then when they get better, like, hey, that finally sounds good. Given the different landscape and the fact you're seeing a lot of students, what do you advise them to do to inculcate themselves into the scene and to try to synthesize some of that same education?
You got to hang. And usually most of those students, their peers are the ones that they're in school with. So hang out with the people that you're in school with because you're going to be the next scene. B, you have to hang. And C, You have to be ready. You have to be prepared because when people hear you, either the door opens or it closes. Now, in terms of the mentorship, like we just have to do a better job of getting out there and being vocal, being seen, So that's kind of why I'm moving back to New York because Roy Hargrove used to do that all the time. He was everywhere, talking to the cats, and so we need that kind of energy so that A, we can be in touch with the younger cats, but B, so they understand and see where the music is and where it's going. And really just the camaraderie that we need to have to form these bands so that they can get into these bands and play some good music, So it's a hard thing because all the older guys, they're gone. So those chances aren't there, but there are newer chances that exist. And we have to kind of take advantage of that. We have to kind of water the tree, I would say, so that the young cats understand that this is out there for them also. He and
What
her.
about? Yeah, for them. But what about from the standpoint of a career? Because it's a similar landscape in contrast to 30 years ago now, where as far as I know, there are fewer opportunities to join a working band.
That's the hustle, man. Like we all trying to figure that out right now. Luckily, I've established myself a long time ago, so that's a little easier. But and now this is where kind of writing your own music and having your own band comes into play. That's the only way you can really go now because those mentorships aren't there. So that's a kind of a step that's been taken away from the younger cats. I feel bad about that, but they have to come out and be leaders now. They don't really have the chance to do the other thing. So and it shows like you need that experience to be in someone's band, to be on the road and, get your ass kicked every night as opposed to just writing your music and coming out and playing that. Like you need a little bit of that, but like it's not here. So we have to kind of do what we can to help them with that. Yeah. That's a hard one too, because you can hear it in the music a lot of times.
What shape do you think that'll take if you move back to New York? You mentioned wanting to be part of
I'll be
the
hanging.
mentorship.
Cats know me.
Yeah.
When I come back home, and it's my home, I hang, man. I talk to cats. They call me the OG, so it's it's embracing that, still feeling young, but just sharing all the knowledge and the stories I have. That kind of is how we keep people together. That's the only way we can do it. Sharing the stories and helping people. If they have questions, some of my peers, they called me up during the pandemic because I had some shit that they were like, wow, like, how'd you come up with that? I'm like, oh, you want to check it out? And so for those guys, we talk concepts. I don't have to show them right, left, right, left, right. I don't have to do that. We just talk about what is the concept of music you're hearing. And so we're going to do the same thing for the younger cats, for the older cats that are still around. We'll keep it, we'll keep sharing. Sharing is caring, baby.
Are we going to see the Greg Hutchinson Institute in Carroll Gardens at some point?
You might, if I can get a building in Carroll Gardens, that would be great. Shit. No, it'll just be everywhere. Cats know they can get at me anytime. Like you did here. Like I'm always open to talking to people about the music and trying to share and learn at the same time. Like what's happening. What is it? What do we need to do? And all of us have to be kind of open that way to like, okay, this is what's going on now. We need to share this info. It's colorless. It's got it's just the music. And I think once we get back to that, then everyone will find that there's a common ground that we're all trying to get to. Just play good notes.
And apropos of that, last time we spoke, you were in the middle of recording a record. In between then and now, I saw a lot of the excellent Instagram clips. So what's the latest with the record? Is it available now? Are you guys touring?
It's out now. It's been out since September, called The Bang, DABANG. And it's doing good. I'm very happy about it. Now it's just trying to get out there and get the stigma of people calling me a jazz drummer away so I can get some gigs with that band. That's the hardest thing, man. Promoters. This is the life we chose. I don't want to be put in a box. I don't believe in boxes, but when you put me there, then I have to dig my way out. So that's kind of why I did the record also. I just like good music.
Are we going to see a CD release show in New York?
Yes. Yes, we try to actually. I was just trying to get on that right now. Hopefully before the end of the year, maybe. If not, definitely the beginning of the year for sure. That's important.
Awesome. Well, if it's before January 9th, I'll try to be there. I'm
Oh
in
man,
town till
pleasure,
early
man. Yeah,
January.
I'll only give it some time. I got a few more things we're gonna release, a couple more remixes, and then we'll keep them. I missed the Grammys this year because I put the record out too late. So I'm trying to keep this momentum for next year, and at the same time do a new record. So
Well, where would you recommend people go to check you out? Where's the first place you'd send them?
in terms of the record.
Anything you want to promote. What's the
Oh,
first thing
they
you
can
want
always
people
go.
to?
My Instagram is always up to date. You know me, I'm always doing stuff. Check the record, and then just we have some stuff we're gonna do. Got a link tree also, but really just Instagram is the way we all communicate now. So like I'm gonna have periods where I'm on there a lot and periods where I'm off. But now we're in a period where we're trying to cultivate new things, new ideas, and just put out some more music, man. I'm gonna flood the market, I guess.
Final thoughts? Anything you want, like a young drummer
Man, keep
listening to
doing
this
what
to
you
take
do,
away?
man. I like the fact that you always trying to show people different styles of music, and don't be, just put it out there. Like don't worry about what anybody thinks. Just put it out there. You're doing something that if somebody else doesn't like it, they can go try and do it themselves. So keep doing what you do, and keep learning, and keep teaching the music the way you hear it. And that's what we need to all do. And if you do that, then shit, that's all. I'm happy. Shit.
Amazing. Well, really appreciate the time. Every time we talk, it's a lot of fun.
Oh man, you can
And
hit me anytime
perhaps
you
I'll run
want,
into
man.
you in New York.
Anytime you got a question, anything, you can always hit me up, man, for sure. Definitely, man.
Sounds great. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day. Good to talk to you.
I'll take care, brother. Good luck, man. Peace.